Senator Scullion.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. I also rise to take note on the Closing the Rep Cap Prime Minister's report of 2013. I would like to commend the Prime Minister and the government. I think this is a very important document, and every year that goes past it's a more important document because it provides us with trend lines so we can have with some confidence know whether or not we're actually going to meet the targets in 2030 or not. And that obviously allows us to be able to provide some priorities in terms of where we put our resources in this area. I'd like to go through some of the indicators, not in the order provided in the Closing the Gap report, but the first two, of course, are the life expectancy. The second is the infant mortality. And the reason I'm drawing with those two first is that I think there's been quite a deal of success in those areas, Mr Deputy President. Life expectancy, I don't think anyone's got any doubt, certainly in the Northern Territory jurisdiction, is going up, and there are no issues that are going to turn it to trend down again. So in effect, we're above trend line. There are no issues around that. I think that it's going to stop us meeting that benchmark. The second is infant mortality. It's a little bit more problematic in terms of the return on the data, and whilst that is on track, it isn't quite above trend, but the experts I speak to, I think we could all reasonably say that they're two indicators that we're not going to have to worry about. Doesn't mean we don't need to take our eye off the ball. We're actually going to meet that those targets, and they're the only real two on track. One of the other indicators was an access to preschool, and we have now, and certainly declared in this report, we have met that target. It's a target that is probably one of the easiest ones because it's not a social target. It's normally a bricks and mortar target. We know it's just about putting resources aside for staffing and for buildings and for processes, and we certainly Australia needs to be very pleased that now the vast majority of Indigenous people have an access to a preschool. But of course, access isn't the only thing, Mr Deputy President. It is very important, and the Prime Minister mentioned this in her contribution, that we need to go from access to attendance. And given that we've now had the access to preschool has in effect been met, I think it would be quite reasonable, given that this is a guiding document that informs Australians and will both inform and guide future parliaments about where we place our resources, that it might be useful in the future documents to deal with the issues around attendance in those preschools. We've got a line item. Yes, we've built them. We know we're happy now. So instead of just saying, oh, well, that's ticked off, we should think about having an addition to deal with how those preschools are going, and I'll leave it to those experts in terms of finding benchmarks that would give us an indication of the success or otherwise, and particularly around attendance. The next indicator is the 16 to 24-year-olds with Year 12 or equivalent. This is a sad reality, and to me, Mr Deputy President, it really irks me, because without attaining Year 12 or equivalent, it really means that what we normally say are an opportunity, the opportunity to see the world, to travel, means you need to have funds. To have funds, you need to get a good job, you need to be very competitive, and you know, we've had a 2% increase in 5 years. We're not on track. We're not going to make it. And we really need to put a lot of thought, not more resources, but a lot of thought into that. But not only is it 2% increase in 5 years, you might think for a moment, we're talking only just over 50% of the Aboriginal population actually gets a Year 12 leaving certificate, 50%, against everyone else who's 86. Now, it's hard to see the other side, Mr Deputy President. 86% of mainstream people expect that we will receive the high school certificate and go on with a whole range of choices. You know, vocational education, you get automatic entry and matriculation, and a choice of professional life. But only 50% of Aboriginal people are going to get that. The last, again, of the indicators is the employment indicator. There has been minor improvements, and I think everybody will acknowledge this is just not even near on track. We are not going to make the target. There's no question about that. And there has to be significant things to change. And of course, these interact, Mr Deputy President. If we don't get the increase into the number of Aboriginal people completing Year 12, we're certainly not going to get an increase in the employment area. So these are all interlinked, and that is very important that we work on those two areas. And I'm not really sure. We've come out with a book, and look, I commend the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. We all talk glowingly about this, and it's, look, we all need to feel good about ourselves. Well, to be frank, there are two of the indicators that are going to look after themselves generally. One of the indicators was a building program. We finished that. It only leaves two indicators that we're not going anywhere on. We are not going to hit the target. We are not going to close the gap. And I think that a lot of intellectual horsepower is going to have to go into, it's not just more money. We need to start thinking of innovative ways under which we can make changes in these very, very important areas. Of course, there are some complementary reports that we can look to that can give us an idea about how well our First Australians are progressing in these areas. And Madam Acting Deputy President, certainly from the Northern Territory and Northern Australians' perspectives, the NAPLAN results are just downright depressing. You know, there are many areas that just say basically we've done school and we can't read and write. We can't read and write. I'm even more saddened by the fact that you manage to get to the end of primary school before someone says, no, you can't read and write. So it's a systemic failure through an education system in some areas, and that has to be rectified as soon as possible. So this is very good to have this data, and it becomes very valuable and more practical over time. It does help us manage what we do, but it's my personal belief, and I have a concern, that the headline figures may well obscure something that's really happening on the ground. You know, for example, in our Year 12 acceleration, yes, we crept forward 2%. I suspect it's probably more than that in metropolitan areas, and I suspect it's going back rapidly in very remote areas. So I think in terms of if you like, a suggested improvement in how we may look at these matters, we need to disaggregate the data so better able to target our resources where they need to be deployed and where the effort really needs to be targeted. So if you look closely at this data and you take away those things that we're going to achieve, those last two indicators where we are simply not closing the gap, we are not going to get there, they are just fundamental to closing the gap on opportunity, and it is a real shame that isn't the case, and certainly I look forward to seeing the 2014 data and hope it's a substantive improvement. I have to say I was a little disappointed at the Prime Minister in her attempt to taking what I consider in the middle of this, and it's all quite a respectable process, to suddenly start taking a cheap shot at Queensland and the Northern Territory about alcohol. We have those debates, and they're robust debates, and they should be. But I saw it as a pretty cheap shot to impress some of the heavier populated areas around our southeast in a political sense, rather than trying to provide this as an independent something with some gravitas and some independence and try to keep the politics out of it. You know, her references to the banned drinkers register and wanting to break that of the Northern Territory, I just think I was a little sad that she hadn't been a bit better informed. There is quite a large body of data that I have seen and validated that indicates that issues like, you know, one person's been arrested. He was on the banned drinkers register. He was arrested 117 times, each one of them drunk. The 60 people on the list have been arrested over 2,000 times between 60 of them. They were all banned off the drinkers register. And at the end of the day, the motivation of the register was to stop people getting access to alcohol. Clearly it just didn't work at all. Everybody accepts that. And so there has to be a better way. Those people who are trapped in a system of sickness, they are sick. you can't treat them in the justice system. You have to take them from the justice system and you have to rehabilitate them in the health system. That's what's happening in the Northern Territory, and I commend the Closing the Gap report, the Prime Minister's report of 2013 to the House.